Ever catch yourself browsing online and get this weird feeling someone's peeking over your shoulder, tracking every click? Well, today we're taking that feeling head on, diving deep into the world of digital cloaking, uncovering the secrets of the Tor network. And we've got a whole stack of research to guide us.
And believe me, it's an exploration worth taking. Tor sits right at this intersection of cutting-edge tech and good old-fashioned individual freedom. It raises questions that really get to the core of online privacy.
Right. We've all heard the whispers about Tor, this kind of anonymous online haven, it's like navigating through layers of an onion thing.
Yeah, and it's funny, that analogy, simple as it sounds, it actually holds up surprisingly well when you start digging into the mechanics of how this onion routing thing actually works.
Okay, so let's peel back those layers, right? Give me the lowdown. Let's say I'm sending a message, but I want to be, Mr. Incognito. How does Tor make that happen?
Okay, so picture this. Your message, that's the core, right? And around that core, you wrap layer upon layer of encryption, just like an onion. Each layer, it contains the address of a Tor computer, what they call an onion router. Your message basically goes on this relay race, passing from one router to the next. Now here's the key. Each router, using a secret key, it peels back just one layer, revealing only the next destination on the route.
A digital relay race of secrecy. I like it. But how does my message even find its way onto this Tor network in the first place? There's got to be a point where my computer connects directly.
You're sharp. That's where proxies come in. You need a special key to get into this network, and that's the Tor browser. It acts as your entry point, connecting you to a Tor entry node. And from there, boom, your traffic enters that onion routing maze we were just talking about.
So I'm basically slipping through this hidden doorway into this anonymous network. Okay, but what about those websites, the ones with those funky .onion addresses? How do those stay hidden in this digital labyrinth?
Ah, you've hit on the hidden services. These are like the crown jewel of the Tor network, really. Imagine a secret meeting spot, right inside the network, a rendezvous point. Hidden services, they use these points to connect with users without ever revealing their actual physical location.
So it's like a covert operation, but instead of briefcases full of secrets, it's data.
Exactly. And to make it even more secure, each user gets a unique, and here's the kicker, ever-changing rendezvous point for their connection. Think of it like a constantly shifting digital fingerprint, making it incredibly hard to track. Now, the hidden service, it announces itself through this distributed database so users can find it, all while keeping its real location top secret.
Clever girl. Okay, but let's be real. Is Tor really this impenetrable fortress of anonymity? Can I just fire up the Tor browser and poof, disappear into the digital ether?
While Tor is super effective, it's not totally foolproof. Think about it. Your data, it's all encrypted as it journeys through those onion routers. But what happens when it hits the final exit node and pops out onto the regular web? That final connection to the website you're visiting, it might not have that same level of encryption.
Hold on. So someone could be eavesdropping on that last leg of the trip, potentially seeing what I'm doing.
You got it. That's why even with Tor, it's crucial to stick to websites that use HTTPS, the ones with that little padlock icon in your address bar. That way you've got encryption even outside of the Tor network, an extra layer of protection.
Good to know. Any other digital potholes to watch out for while we're at it?
Oh, absolutely. Tor does a pretty good job of flagging and filtering out known malicious exit nodes, the ones with bad intentions, but they can still be a threat. And then there's JavaScript that it's double-edged sword, really. It makes websites more functional, but it can also be used to reveal stuff about you, even when you're using Tor. The thing to remember is Tor's like a secure envelope. It protects the message inside, but it can't always hide who sent it or what their intentions might be.
Right, like they say, you can lead a user to Tor, but you can't guarantee they won't open the door to digital danger themselves. Okay, so we've navigated the basics of onion routing, but what about this mysterious Tor web everyone's whispering about? What's actually lurking in this hidden network of websites?
Ah, now that's where our journey gets really interesting. Let's move on to part 2, where we'll map out the uncharted territories of the Tor web, a digital landscape that's way more structured than you might think.
All right, so we've made our way through the winding tunnels of onion routing, but now we find ourselves at the entrance of this legendary Tor web, right? So what's waiting for us in this digital underground? Is it really the lawless free-for-all we imagine it to be?
That's the really interesting part. Because, yeah, it might seem like some sort of digital Wild West, but the research actually reveals a surprising amount of order within the Tor web. Like, it's not this random sprawl you might expect. It's actually a landscape shaped by, distinct patterns and structures.
Structure, you mean like what? Like some sort of secret society with like bylaws and designated meeting spots?
Well, yeah, kinda.
Mm.
Studies have actually shown that the Tor web, it exhibits what researchers call a bow tie structure. Like, imagine an actual bow tie, right? You've got that central knot and then two wings spreading outwards.
Okay, so not your typical website layout then.
Not even close. In the Tor web's bow tie, the knot, that represents this core group of interconnected hidden services. These are like the hubs the authorities think, like directories of hidden services, popular forums, online marketplaces, that kind of thing.
Ah, so basically the digital town square where everyone hangs out.
Exactly. And then radiating out from this core, you've got the wings of the bow tie, right? These represent a huge number of hidden services that mostly just link inwards towards that core instead of connecting to each other.
So it's not really a web of, equal connections, but more like a solar system. Like the
Right.
core is the sun and all the other services orbiting around it.
Now, that is a great analogy. And just like a solar system, the Tor web's core, it exerts a powerful pull. One study found that a crazy small number of these hub services, like we're talking a handful, could connect to something like 90% of the network in just one hop.
Wow. That's a ton of digital traffic flowing through a very select group. So what does this actually tell us about the nature of the Tor web then?
Well, it kind of highlights this fascinating tension between anonymity on the one hand and centralization on the other.
Hmm.
See, because even though individual users, they benefit from Tor's whole cloaking mechanism, the network itself, it reveals this hierarchical structure. Certain hubs, just by being popular or useful, they end up wielding a lot of influence within this hidden world.
Makes sense. Okay, but what about the outer edges of this digital solar system then? The services on the kind of the fringes of the bow tie. What secrets do those hold?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, actually. Because research shows that a pretty significant chunk of these more peripheral hidden services, they're surprisingly short-lived. Websites pop up, they vanish, they maybe reappear somewhere else. It all contributes to the whole, dynamism and air of mystery that surrounds the Tor web.
So it's not just about staying hidden, but also about staying one step ahead, like constantly shifting to avoid detection.
Exactly. And all this constant change, it makes it seriously difficult to map the Tor web in any kind of permanent way. It's almost like trying to, I don't know, like catch smoke or something. Just when you think you've got a handle on its shape, it shifts and changes into something new.
Sounds like a digital echo of the very idea of anonymity itself, really. But this impermanence, this constant change, does it make the Tor web inherently unstable then?
It's actually quite the opposite, because
Yeah.
while the outer layers, they're always in motion, the core, those central hubs and authorities, they stay surprisingly resilient. They form this really stable foundation, even as all these services around them are, blinking in and out of existence.
A digital ecosystem in constant flux, yet anchored by these unwavering pillars. It really does paint a vivid picture of kind of the Tor web's paradoxical nature. But who are the architects and inhabitants of this ever-shifting landscape? Are they all, digital ghosts lurking in the shadows, or is the reality a bit more, well, nuanced than that?
And that is the question we'll tackle in part 3. Be prepared to dive into the demographics of the Tor web because, as you'll soon find out, the answer might just surprise you.
Okay, so we've carefully peeled back the layers of this onion, right? We've mapped this whole intricate structure of the Tor web. But now for the real question. Who are these elusive figures navigating this digital maze? Is it just a playground for cyber criminals, or is there actually more to it than that?
It's a question, honestly, that's fueled so many debates, so many assumptions. And just like, most things Tor-related, the answer is way more nuanced than you might think.
So it's not just a haven for like digital thieves and mischief makers.
Not at all. While Tor's anonymity, yeah, it definitely attracts people who are looking to, maybe exploit it for illegal stuff, research actually paints a much broader picture. The user base is actually incredibly diverse.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like what kind of diversity are we talking about here?
Imagine this. You're looking at Tor traffic, right?
Yeah.
You're expecting to see this constant stream of like, shady deals going down. But then in the middle of all these encrypted packets, you see all this traffic and it's headed to, get this, totally normal, everyday websites.
Wait, really? Ordinary websites? Like, why would anyone use Tor to browse, I don't know, like their favorite online recipe site?
Well, it speaks to this, like growing awareness, I guess, and concern about online privacy in general, right?
Mm.
In this day and age of like constant data harvesting and targeted ads, it makes sense that people are drawn to Tor's ability to just, obscure their digital footprints.
Right, right. So it's less about like engaging in illegal activities and more about just being able to move through the digital world without feeling like you've got eyes on you constantly.
You got it.
Hmm.
It's about reclaiming that sense of anonymity, a sense of control in what's become this like increasingly transparent online environment. I mean, think about journalists working in repressive countries, right?
Mm.
Or whistleblowers trying to expose corruption. Heck, even just everyday people who value their privacy
Mm.
and want to keep their online activity away from, from corporations, from governments, from all those prying
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not always about what you're doing online, but who you're trying to avoid doing it in front of, basically. Okay, but what about the hidden services themselves, the ones we were talking about before? Those must provide some clues about Tor's user base.
Absolutely. Researchers, in trying to understand this whole hidden world, they've spent a ton of time trying to categorize these hidden services, kind of like, how websites on the regular internet are organized.
So have they been able to create like a map of this digital underground showing where the black markets are and the more, I don't know, the more harmless places?
I wish it were that simple. It's pretty messy. They have identified categories, though, like there's hosting, which includes everything from like file sharing to those anonymous web servers. There's marketplaces where you can find pretty much anything from totally legitimate goods to, let's just say, less savory offerings. And then there's forums where people have discussions on, all kinds of topics. Some are totally mundane, and then others are a bit more sensitive, let's say.
It's like a digital reflection of the real world, right?
Yeah.
You've got your bustling marketplaces, your quiet libraries, your even your hidden alleyways.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The lines between these categories, it can get really blurry really fast. What you think is like an innocent forum about like gardening or something could very quickly lead you down this rabbit hole to something way more clandestine.
It's a good reminder that looks can be deceiving, especially online. So this actually makes me think about something. Earlier, we were talking about that bow tie model, the structure of the Tor web, right? Is there any connection between that structure and the actual content that's hosted in those areas? Like, are certain types of hidden services more likely to be found in certain parts of the bow tie?
That is the million-dollar question.
Mm.
And it's one that researchers are still trying to figure out. While they've found some correlations, the truth is the relationship between the layout of the Tor web and the stuff that's actually on it, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And it's constantly changing. It's not as easy as saying like, oh, all the illegal stuff happens on the outer edges and the core is full of saints or something.
So it's a constantly shifting landscape in terms of both the structure and the content, which honestly makes it all the more fascinating. But speaking of fascinating, let's talk about one of the most intriguing findings from all this Tor research, something called the freedom paradox. What is that exactly?
So the freedom paradox, it basically challenges this very common assumption about Tor, that people mainly use it to get around censorship in oppressive countries, right?
Mhm.
But get this, research has actually uncovered this weird correlation. It seems that Tor usage for potentially illegal things is actually higher in countries that have more political freedom.
Whoa, really? That's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? You'd think that people living under repressive governments would have like a much bigger need for something like Tor.
Right. Logically, yeah, it makes sense. But the data tells a totally different story. There are a few possible explanations for this, though. One theory is that in societies that have, strong free speech protections, where there's not as much internet censorship, people just, they might feel more comfortable engaging in riskier online behavior.
So it's not necessarily that people in free societies are more likely to do shady stuff online. It's just that they might feel a little less, I don't know, less held back, less scared of the consequences.
You nailed it. It really highlights this super complex relationship between like technology, human behavior, and just societal norms in general.
Mm.
Another theory is that it might be about awareness. Like maybe Tor is just more well-known and easier to access in those free societies.
Hmm.
Think about it. If you're constantly struggling against government censorship and surveillance, just learning about Tor or like even being able to access it in the first place, that can be a huge challenge on its own.
That's a really good point. It's a reminder that, freedom, whether it's in the real world or the digital one, it's complicated, it's multifaceted, and, often pretty paradoxical. So, as we kind of wrap up here, what's the takeaway for our listeners who've, bravely journeyed with us into the depths of the Tor network?
I think the most important thing to remember is that Tor, like any tool, really, it can be used for good or for bad. It'll depend on the person using it. It's a technology that resists easy categorization. It's a digital enigma that really makes you think about online privacy, anonymity, even the very nature of the internet itself.
We've really gone deep here, haven't we? We explored the technical ins and outs of this whole onion routing thing. We ventured into like the shadowy corners of the Tor web. We even tried to wrap our heads around, the minds of the people who choose to use it. And as we've seen, the Tor network, much like an actual onion, has layers upon layers of complexity. It's constantly evolving, and honestly, who knows? What we've uncovered today might just be the tip of the iceberg.
That's right. As technology keeps advancing, and as we learn more and more about the Tor network, who knows what other revelations await us in this enigmatic corner of the digital world.
It seems our little journey into the heart of the onion has only just begun. Until next time, then, happy exploring, everyone.